Okay, we're gonna see if this works. We're gonna see if this version works on here. Everybody come on. Okay, there we go. Let's see if we get some people in here. Okay, let's try that. Okay. I think I did it right. Did I do it? Okay.
Okay,
Yo,
There we go.
there we go.
there we go. All right, third
I
time's a
got
charm.
it. Did she?
So she was saying it wasn't working for her for some reason, but maybe
Okay, I just did it.
okay.
I think
Hopefully she
that.
can join now.
There we go.
And then Liam's here too.
Liam's here. He's just got a request. I think. Okay. All right. Let's see if this works. I'm gonna see if it works.
Here, just like Jonah, let's kick it off. Let's just start talking, maybe.
You want to just get started now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and try and let them in as we start going.
Okay, awesome. Sure. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for coming. Basically, this usually would be the Meidas VB rundown, but we figured that we'll postpone it until today because, as a lot of you may know, this past month we've seen a lot of mass shootings, 45 reported shootings, which is uh, so terrible. And I guess the purpose of this live today will just be to discuss gun control and what the Biden administration has done so far, what we can do, and just kind of to inform you on what's going on. Yeah, you want to get started? Okay, so like I said, there's been 45 reported shootings. There was one a couple days ago where there was a FedEx shooting. There's also been one with the Tennessee high school shooting. In certain things Biden administration has done is he's called this in after April 8th, which is right after the Colorado and Georgia shootings. Biden said that the gun violence in this country is an epidemic and a national embarrassment, which is absolutely true. And he also announced an executive order on gun control. And so there's a couple things about the gun control executive order that we just like to highlight. So here I can mention the first thing. So the first thing is he's going to try to prevent, the Biden administration is trying to prevent the increase in ghost guns. So essentially, federal law requires that manufacturers put serial numbers on guns in order for them to be traced if they're used for criminal use. And it also requires background checks. Now, what's happening now is that ghost guns are guns that can be made through with other materials such as plastic or whatever. And the main in one of the significances of a ghost gun is that they don't have a serial number and they don't need a background check because people can just get access to these ghost guns without any background check or any history because that part doesn't matter. And so the scary part about that is that we can just see an increase in mass shootings and they won't stop unless we find a way to track down ghost guns. So the Biden administration is trying to find a way to effectively prevent ghost guns from being increased and being spread. Would you like to talk about the red flag laws?
Which one of us? Me or him?
Yeah, go ahead,
Either.
TJ.
Okay. Biden is also trying to get the red flags laws passed. The purpose of these laws is for a family member or a police officer to temporarily block a certain particular person from obtaining a firearm. More than half of all suicides involve a firearm, but without the use of the firearm, the suicide rate would drop. Um,
So,
so go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, to kind of put this into perspective, if you look at the amount of suicide rates right now, over half of them are with the involvement of a firearm. It is just so scary to see a statistic like that. So, like you mentioned, and like President Biden mentioned on April 8th. Oh, it already
Oh, there we go.
decreasing decreasing access to a firearm, we'll see a huge decline in suicide rates, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I just want to point out, Jonah, real quickly before we
Of course.
move on to the next point is without, I always say that background checks are very, very important to gun legislation. Um, but I think also we can't regulate what you do out in your own home. So I think to have someone say or to prevent you from getting those guns, I think is also important because sometimes you may pass the mental health background check, or you may pass the other type of background checks that we have, and you may lie or you may say, I'm feeling okay now. So I think for families to be able to prevent certain members of their own families to get those guns is also important because without that, um, we could potentially see the suicide rate climb up again. So I think in order to establish um, gun legislation, we've got to be able to include the mental health aspect and really what your family life is like as well.
Yeah, to add on to that, mentally stable, having good mental health at a certain point in your life doesn't mean that it's going to carry through. And we know that the presence of a gun obviously increases like the suicide rates. For women, they're 35 times more likely if they own a handgun. For men, they're 8 times more likely if they own a handgun. So I think definitely having more preventative action versus just reacting to the mass shootings is the way to go.
Yeah,
Just kind
we
of
need really the action to really change what's happening. We can't just have rates keep going up after these kind of events.
And I think it also begs the question of if majority of Americans support various gun control measures, then why can't so many of them be passed? And I think it's just part of it is that first of all, there's misinterpretations or misconceptions of what the NRA is, of what the Second Amendment is, in that, for example, how Democrats are going to take away your guns, which is just simply not true. There's like this whole thing of Biden's taking away your gun. Clinton, when he was was in office, and Obama also, they're going to take away your guns. And there's just this huge support of the NRA as well, because they believe that the NRA is an organization for gun owners like themselves, which is simply not true. They're an organization for gun manufacturers, and all they want is for these gun owners to continue, or these gun manufacturers to continue to make profit. That's it. Right. And there's literally criminal enterprise that the GOP refuses to stand up for.
Yeah.
It's scary.
But I think also, too, the other point that I just want to quickly make, although we have, I want to remind people that the NRA is also going bankrupt. Just a quick note of that. So
it's true.
When you are if you're an NRA member and you're sending money to the NRA, you are fueling their trying to get out of bankruptcy. So I think people need to know, as we always say, follow the money, follow where the money is. I think, and when you follow the money is going to legal funds and legal fees and trying to do this whole Second Amendment probe thing. I think it's disingenuous, and I think the twice impeached former one-term president needs to slowly understand that this is not about taking away people's guns. It's about regulating guns. I think there's a difference between taking away and regulation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that is really the biggest fear when anyone will ever talk about gun control, is because there are lots of normal, rational gun owners out there who are not going to go and commit mass atrocities. And the messaging just needs to be very clear that guns will not be taken away unless there is a threat that is present. That's just really something that needs to be changed, and that's been the messaging for the past 30 years. Whenever there's a new candidate, like the NRA will then just put out a message saying, for example, Al Gore, when he was running in 2000, people would be like, if Al Gore wins, you lose. Your guns will be taken away. Your rights will be gone.
They did it this
that
cycle
just needs
with
to be changed.
O'Rourke.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah, that was with Beta's whole thing. Yeah, that's
yeah,
why.
like regardless of like where you stand on these issues, like I think we can safely say that the statement of taking away people's guns, something that's not very plausible in this country.
Right.
So like I don't think
Yeah.
people need to think of that as a concern because it isn't. It is about reforming the process to make sure that it's safer for everyone. And I think if we can do a better job of letting people know that.
I do believe that part of that process does involve taking away access to assault rifles because they're
Right.
just
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also,
Mhm.
if you look at events like these and you look at shootings like these
Mhm.
and you look at the guns that they're using rifles. They're using assault rifles.
Yeah.
And that's what the whole purpose isn't to take away your guns, like you said, but it's to find a safer way.
No, I completely agree with you on the rifles, but I think what I'm trying to say is the NRA markets it in a way as if we are taking the Second Amendment and kind of scratching it off the Constitution, which, number one, not plausible, and number two, not the goal, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think to speak just briefly about the Second Amendment, because here's the whole thing. That's the only argument Republicans have now. Like when we're talking about COVID, Second Amendment, like what does COVID and the Second Amendment have to do with anything?
Yeah.
Like that's one of the things that I dislike about Republicans is the fact that this whole Second Amendment argument really applies to every conversation that they have when it comes to criticism. It's like the whataboutism. Remember Kellyanne Conway used to do that whole sort of like, what about this? Or what about that?
Yeah.
But I think it's this sort of
Alternative facts.
whataboutism. Right, it's alternative facts, and I think it's this
Yeah.
whataboutism of the guns because they really don't have an answer to some of the other questions, so they kind of pontificate their other issues with gun control and gun legislation to things that actually people are looking for. And so that was the whole thing about Donald Trump's kind of CPAC speech was they're going to take away your gun. That was the big takeaway that I saw. But he didn't really address the COVID or anything else. It was more so the Second Amendment rights.
Well, I think that's what happens when you have a party with politicians that their whole base is based off of lies and that they're spewing facts and that they're only talking about things that the Democratic Party will make your life significantly worse with these things. And part of that is the Second Amendment. That's part of their thing. That's what Josh Hawley will go in. And another thing is that you have Republicans, if they say otherwise, then they'll just bully them.
Yeah.
And I
So,
don't
Like,
wanna-
if anyone comes out for gun control, you are just like done in their eyes. You're not going to be supported as a Republican if you come out against common sense gun control.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
It's just
think,
facts.
you were trying to say something. I just wanted to hear what you wanted to say.
Oh, I mean, I was just gonna say it's not like Americans don't recognize this, right? A lot of elections, these people that we talk about, they're winning these elections. First of all, they might not even get the majority support, or
Mhm.
number two, there's redlining and there's voter suppression. We see that a lot, especially in the South, of like how we can use policy points like gun legislation to win, even if I don't think that's the definitive win of their actual state. But
Right.
Definitely.
And I just wanted to throw a stat out there. The FBI released a preliminary statistic showing that a major increase of murder within the last year, with a 25% rise in agencies that reported quarterly data. The FBI did not receive data from several cities with known big increases like New York, Chicago, and New Orleans. But cities of all sizes reported more than a 20% increase. So I think the increase is large for murders, unfortunately. But then you've also got to deal with, you know, what is the process like with getting a gun? So those different kinds of things. And 20%, it was a 25% rise in agencies that reported quarterly data. So I mean that's a large amount.
Yeah. I mean, the data, it's absolutely.
I
Um,
think I don't think people don't generally know these statistics or they aren't available because I think we definitely know they are. But my thing is like I feel like in a way we don't recognize how much we've normalized these statistics and how much we've
yeah,
normalized the degree of
Yeah,
gun violence in our country.
100%.
And yeah,
Well,
and
yeah. It
once it
doesn't even
gets,
go
well,
ahead,
go
Nick.
ahead,
Go
Nick.
ahead.
go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it like, and also then we can't even. It doesn't even. It just sits with us that these events are happening all the time, and that it just becomes the normal, which can't happen. It just should not be that way. Go ahead,
100%.
Jonah.
Well, I was just gonna add, like, same thing. If you look at like homicide rates in this country, for example, in comparison to other countries, it's 30 per 100,000 in the United States, and for Europe, it's 2.3 per 100,000. So kind of just to put stuff into his perspective, like you were saying, this can't be the normal. This shouldn't be a norm. Seeing events like these happening is scary, and that's something that we can't keep seeing. And it's something that the Biden administration is trying their best to stop.
And
Yeah.
even with like the reporting of it, right? So we see like the major mass shootings that are going on, but even then, gun violence exists outside of mass shootings. And this is, I guess, somewhat, it's related, but a little different in the sense of I've had the opportunity to talk to several news stations in Boston and Massachusetts, and we're a pretty, blue state. But even then, the reporting, especially before the Black Lives Matter movement got so much media presence, before it's really just centered around if the victims of the violence were white, because if they weren't, often these cases would never even be reported. And that's where gun violence takes place the most and targets people of color the most.
100%.
Yeah, and I know we wanted to move on to something else, but I was just gonna say also too. I know we're talking about gun legislation and gun laws within our country, but I want to take another perspective. How are we training our police officers to handle guns and to first of all, I'm sorry that whole I mixed my taser with my gun kind of defense line just it wasn't working. And so I think we've got to go back. Not only do we need our um, our regular American citizens, you know, taught sensible gun laws and gun legislation, but we also need our police officers to know that I understand that we shoot to kill. That's the whole thing, right? But I think that there are other ways of stabilizing a situation other than using a gun. And don't mix your gun up with your taser. First of all, they're two different colors, two different weights. And so I think although
And they're on
having this
different
gun
sides of your body.
and there are different sides of your body. I think, having this gun legislation conversation is very, very important, but also training our police officers to practice what we're already preaching. And I think so
Absolutely.
while we should focus on legislation in the House and in the Senate, we've got to go back and look at the training of some of our active duty officers.
I mean, I completely agree. I think what training on average in the States is 8 months for a police
Right.
officer. That includes the whole academy, and then you also get the gun training within that. And I think, like, if we can't trust our own police to handle themselves and be a good gun owner, how can we trust them to de-escalate
Then
situations
patrol
with
people.
other people who
Yeah,
could potentially
Yeah.
cause this
Totally.
violence?
because if they're the ones causing the crime, then who do we rely on? Like, it's so scary.
Yeah.
And obviously, police reform is a way larger discussion with gun laws tied into that, but
Yeah,
definitely.
and then I think the whole premise also, and I know this is kind of like mixed conversation, but
Go ahead.
I think, I think people use the whole defund the police. That's also the other thing. The defund the police and the Second Amendment are like the two calling cards for Republicans,
Huge
and I think
misconceptions. Yeah.
and I think they're sort of misconception of what
Mhm.
defund the police means is a lot different than what some moderates and even some progressives are saying that needs to happen. So I
Yeah.
think, you know, talking about gun legislation is important, but also talking about how are we allocating funds to our police departments can
Mhm.
add to that conversation.
I was just gonna add to that. I think another thing too is that, like you were saying, they're stuck to this belief that like defunding the police means that like they don't get funding, that there's no more police. I talked to when I was phone banking for Biden, I was talking to this one Trump supporter who was talking about like, no, you guys are all the defund police. Like, you don't want any more police. And I was like, that is just not
true.
So yeah.
Again, like we're talking about ideas that would never be plausible in our country, you know, regardless of like where we would stand on it. And I think it's good to talk about like where the finances go, because I think we need to recognize even the NRA, it isn't about this whole like gun owner thing, protection. It doesn't even accomplish the goal that it's really stating. It is to make money. And
it's a lobbying group.
It's not for gun owners. Like I said, like, this is for gun manufacturers to make money. That's their whole point. That's their whole purpose.
If you were to go on the NRA website, they're going to say that they're the longest lasting civil rights organization in the country, because that is what they'll want you to see. But they are working for corporations and just benefiting from politicians' votes. It's real, and they've been doing this for decades, and it just thankfully they're almost bankrupt. So
they are.
My question is the NRA necessarily civil rights? Because there's a difference between being able to defend your home. There's something else between going to having like a military camp in your basement. Like, is that really like? Is there a difference there? What do you think? Because I think when people hear the word civil rights, I don't think that that's necessarily true. What do you think? I'm posing a question.
So here's your question.
Do we think that the NRA is representing civil rights?
I would say no.
No.
Not at all.
I wanted to make that point clear. I wanted to make that no. You know, that's like, not. I mean, have they? This is just my question to the people from the NRA that are watching. I mean, have they, donated to the Black Lives Matter movement? Probably not, right? Have they donated to anti-Asian hate crimes? Probably not. So I think that those, their sort of branding of being inclusive to civil rights is just intellectually dishonest. Go ahead, Joe.
I mean, sorry, dishonesty, Republican, like it goes together for me at this point. They don't have much to hang on to other than like the three statements we said. And I think that's part of like the problem of how we approach these situations. We get so caught up in wording and symbolism and phrases that we forget about divert from like the actual problem at hand and what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I think that's true. Yeah. I think we use these terms as sort of like calling cards for people in the middle of the country. Because if we really want to look at it, people in Wyoming and Ohio and other places, they have gun ranges and they shoot things and they're like, oh, you're going to take away my pleasures of shooting my gun. And I think I think when you get to the symbolism and the vocabulary and some of the things that Republicans are saying, let's just be honest, Joe Manchin too, right? Because he's got like this whole Democratic, I don't even know what party he belongs to, honestly. But I think, they have this sort of way to kind of just muddy the waters of what the word actually is meaning and what the phrase is and what we're truly trying to say. And I think that speaks not only to people in the middle of the country, but also to some even disenfranchised Republican independents that, should have probably stayed within the Republican Party because of those thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just kind of wanted to bring up a point that I thought we could talk about, which was straw purchasing, like kind of the amount of guns you can buy or how many guns you can buy each year/month. I'm not sure about other states, but in Massachusetts, and this is after like recent reform, I believe in the past decade, that you can still buy one gun each month, which means 12 guns a year. And a lot of people do buy 12 guns a year and take advantage of that whole thing. And I think I want to just touch on this because this is like a legislative point that I think in a lot of like blue states we can work on and we can approach to our state houses with.
Well, I was just going to add, it's also 12 guns legally. There could be so many others too.
Yeah, there could be like 50 guns illegally. So.
Well, yeah, that's like the whole point of the ghost guns thing. That's what it's all about, is that there are these people that get so attached to their guns and they just want more and more. And so it gets to a point that they'll start making guns illegally and they'll start distributing them. And that's what we need to track down too. Once again, 12 guns in a year is terrible.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you because you brought it up and I think it's a good point. Do we think that there should be a limit on how many guns you can purchase in a year? Because I think that there should just be a solid
0.
He said 0. No.
I think there should be like a number, like a sensible number of, guns you should purchase. Like, what would be like a good number that you all would say you could? Other than 0, because then we just.
I stand by 0. I don't know. I don't have the statistics to know.
I mean, I think I would have to definitely research more to like give you a number. I can tell you what, it's going to be lower than 12. I think one gun a month is insane. And we know that I think the only argument that stands for that is, I enjoy collecting guns or I enjoy having this, which isn't, for me, it's kind of like live safety versus you enjoy. I weigh things a little different.
I think there's definitely a difference between people saying, "Oh, I'd love to have this gun," or "I need this gun." Like there are some people who are kind of like, "Oh, I need this gun to protect my family," and there's a lot of times where that is really not the case. But then there's also the thing where people sometimes get like addicted to getting lots of guns. People get like thousands of guns, and then they just start selling them, and then it keeps going and going. So it definitely needs to be like controlled, I guess.
I think there's this other misconception though, that the only way to stop a guy with a gun is to have a gun as well. Is to be there with
Bad guy with a gun, good guy with a gun.
So, okay, can I ask a question? This may be a stupid question, but I'm just going to ask it anyway.
Keep asking questions, TJ, go.
Because
no matter how stupid.
No stupid. Let's just say, if a person has a gun, now I disagree with the rest of the panel on that issue. I think if you have a gun, and I don't have a gun, the probability of you shooting me is a lot higher. So I think
what you just said is totally true. I totally agree.
So I believe that the Second Amendment is important. Not doing the whole Republican thing like people are trying to take it away, but what I am saying is I think if there is a school shooting or if there's a mass shooting, and if somebody has a gun and has the ability to stop that person from shooting more people, use the gun. And so I think not necessarily to put a pun on this, but to fight firearm with firearm is sometimes necessary. I'm not saying that it needs to be in every case, but I'm saying sometimes it's necessary to protect others that are around you.
But we've seen our system, fail even when it is necessary. If we look at the Parkland shooting, right, the police officer that was on hand for that case
literally left.
So, so systematically, even the objective that we've pointed out, the definite need that we've decided that this is why we're going to have it, hasn't worked. So that just tells me that this isn't the actual intention of the policy and this legislative issues that they're trying to pass.
Absolutely.
I just want to say more on that. There's that whole kind of philosophy of the what you'll stop a bad guy with a gun with is a good guy. That is like, when you think of it, it's a theory that seems all good and foolproof, but if there's no proper training in place, the cases are that it's not going to work out. So if there's going to be people like that who are going to be like, oh, I'm a good guy with a gun, there needs to be training to show them what to really do, not to just like act right on their instincts in a situation. If there's proper training, then it can be a very like foolproof system, I think.
And
Sure.
Yeah,
But that's not
I
often the
wasn't
case, though.
saying. I just want to make clear, I wasn't saying that everybody should have a gun. My
I agree.
point was,
Yeah.
my point was just maybe and the Parkland thing was kind of confusing because the whole purpose of him being there was to protect people. But I think people need to be trained. There needs to be a sort of federal mandate, I believe, on how to train. So I think that that's also different. But I just wanted to read because we were talking about the um, the firearm trafficking, and there was a bill proposed by Senator Leahy that would make it an explicit federal crime to act as a straw purchaser of a firearm. The bill would also create penalties for anyone who transfers a firearm with reasonable um, cause to believe that it would be used for a drug crime, crime of violence, or act of terrorism. These reforms would help uh, keep guns out of the hands of dangerous criminals and reduce safety risks for law enforcement officers confronting criminal organizations. And so I think the bill is comprehensive. I think this whole again, and I know Senator Leahy, he's more on the bipartisan side, but I think for for that, I think that we need to um, kind of look at where people are taking guns, how they're manufacturing them. The ghost guns is a very interesting thing because I didn't even think that was a thing until the president mentioned it. And so I think those kinds of conversations, especially about gun trafficking, is important because even sometimes people pay somebody to build them a gun, and then there was no in between. There was no test. We didn't see what IQ you had, and so there's just a lot of different things happening with that.
And even going past the initial purchasing of the gun and the initial trainings, it's a gun. We should have check-ins more than just after purchasing the gun. I feel like even after you've gotten the gun, reinstating your license or the ownership of the gun to make sure that's still okay for that person, because things can change.
I think an example of this, like when you buy a car, for example, you still have checks when your car every like 3 years, right? Mm-hmm. If that's something for a car, which is an automobile that could kill you too, and it could be used for certain things, but I think that's the same thing we have to do for a gun, especially. And yeah, I think there should be checks as well.
Yeah, I agree with the checks. I think that we need better. I think your gun check should be renewed every year because we all go through different things in our lives, and so sometimes if we don't understand how a gun could potentially be used, I think it's just like when you get something renewed every year. It should just be one of those things. You got to get your flu shot every year. Get your your gun license and registration renewed, and so I think that should also be a huge component of our new gun laws and legislation.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think I guess approaching gun violence, obviously, from a proactive state, but also in a holistic way is so important because it isn't just do these checks, these mental health checks, because in order for the mental health checks to be effective, I would probably say that making mental health and conversations about mental health more streamlined and more mainstream is
and more accepted.
Going to help.
It is already,
yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything else on the list we want to add, or?
No, I wanted to quickly touch up. There were two mass shootings this week, maybe there were more, but we saw the ones that are reported in the news. And as Ari mentioned before, sometimes they're not reported because they don't involve the
Well,
majority of the country, which I think is wrong. Um, I, I didn't know how to feel this week because we had Dante Wright's death. We had um, multiple people were shot in Tennessee, and then we had this FedEx mass shooting in Indianapolis, and so all these things are happening all at once. And I think that this has become such a right, left, center issue, and people are dying, and I feel like politicians on both sides, and I know we're a majority of a Democratic organization here, but I think people on both sides of this conversation haven't done enough. And
Yeah.
I feel
safety should
like,
be a bipartisan issue.
Yeah.
I feel like we have we have not done enough to protect African Americans. We haven't done enough to protect minority communities. We haven't done enough to protect what this country was supposed to be about. And I don't see it now.
Well,
And
I
I
think
I feel, go ahead.
Well, I think when we're at a point where, I know we mentioned this earlier, but when we're at a point where mass shootings is a norm, you haven't done enough, and that there's more we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and according to a stat, I'm sorry, all right, I just want to make this stat.
yeah.
This is the 45th mass shooting um
This month,
in the United States since the Atlanta area shooting in March 16th. So we've had 45 mass shootings in a matter of a month, and so I
45
think
reported mass shootings.
Yeah.
no, those are the ones
Exactly. Yeah.
reported.
So
So I
there's
think
At least
there
one
could
a day.
definitely be more. Yeah.
well,
For
I,
sure. And even if, just like touch on your point about we haven't done enough to serve and protect African American communities, like if we look at the reporting that surrounds, like, we're all consuming media at such fast rates that these news stations,
Right. Absolutely.
unfortunately, going to be our primary indicator and how we find out about these things. When I was, for example, like the case about the boy that had his hands up and was still managed to get shot, this idea
Yeah.
of treating him like, but he was running away, he didn't like put his hands up fast enough. I don't feel like we would be asking those questions had it been someone who was white. Had it been
Thank
someone who
you.
was white, it would be,
100%.
but he was just 13, he didn't know any better, it's probably he was just playing around. Like those, I feel like in a way people of color, and especially African Americans, when it comes to when we talk about gun violence, have to grow up in media or have to
Yep.
like age or mature so much faster because of the amount of violence that is, unfortunately, that is a probability in their communities.
Right.
He,
Absolutely. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just gonna add, he is an example of a report of a shooting that we didn't know about until later, right? Wasn't his body found like a couple weeks after? So
Yeah.
just to add, like those, like I know I said this earlier, but like those 45 mass shootings in the last month, that's only 45 reported. So we don't
Yeah.
know.
And I just want to say too, because you touched on this, is I watched this week a person in uniform, and I know we're talking about guns, but I felt so heavy this week about watching that because there are people who have served this country, I believe, in all of our families, and so I think watching him be afraid for his life and for his livelihood, I think was so devastating. And some of the comments that the officers were telling him while he was being sort of abused by these police officers was like I didn't know how to feel. But I also think after we watched it, we kind of realize that this has become a normal occurrence. And so we didn't really take the steps to say, you know what, this is wrong. Yes, it was in the news. Yes, it was in, wherever. But I think the amount of news media coverage for some of these police brutality events has become less and less because it has become a norm in our society. And so I don't know how to go forward in this country if we don't address the police brutality issue with the guns, with anything. If you even have a bat and you're a police officer, you need to have a test, okay? I think we've become so desensitized to this issue of police brutality that it has literally become one news cycle and then it's over and then we're finished and then we move on
Exactly.
with our daily lives.
An
And so I
example.
think we've got to address that.
An
I think-
example. Oh, sorry, Gail.
Sorry, I was going to just say, like, part of it is not even, like, I guess in a way personifying all these lives that we've lost. And I feel like because it's happening so quickly and the news covers it so quickly,
Yeah.
we, like, don't stop to think, like, the communities that we've actually hurt, the families of those people. And I don't know, I guess it's just sad. And there's often, when we're, like, looking at these cases, like, when we talked about George Floyd, it upset me that there was so much talk about whether he actually committed a crime or not, or whether he actually did something. Because in my opinion, regardless of him being guilty or innocent, what the police officer did was obviously not okay in either sense. And I think we've gone off in this place where we think of police officers and we're putting them in a place where we're thinking of them as people who can act as a judge and a jury. And I think that we're getting into such dangerous territory.
Well, I think
Right.
another thing as well on George Floyd is you're at a point where there are Republicans who will say things so, like, even though it's so blatantly obvious that Derek Chauvin's a murderer, they still make arguments to say no, he's not. He wouldn't have died if George Floyd hadn't done drugs in his past or whatever, and that he had heart problems. Like, they make up these excuses to find things that are so clear. And then on your note, on your point is there's certain shootings that aren't even reported, or they're reported so quickly. On Monday, there's Knoxville Police Department shot and killed 17-year-old Anthony Thompson, and the news of this shot hit national media and was presented as if Anthony was a school shooter who shot a cop before another officer bravely returned fire, and then now the media stopped talking about it. So
Right.
And I think, like, I don't want to say, like, news media, it's still part of, corporate America. It's still part of a business. And I think that kind of ties into it. Like, even in my town, there was a case where a police officer had shot someone who was brown. And, in our community, or with proceedings with our local press, the general consensus was, how do we cover this up? How do we protect our reputation? Or I guess the excuse that they would put up for that is, we don't want the younger kids or the high schoolers to, like, be sensitive towards this, or they shouldn't know about this. And I just thought that was so horrible, because I think once we realize that these are still institutions, these are still businesses that are choosing to report on what's going to make them money. And that's where we get into this tricky game of, like, we need to think about the media that we're consuming and make sure we're consuming it in a meaningful way, because these are people's lives.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And that's why I think also, don't just read or watch one news station. I think now some people laugh at me when I say this, but I watch Fox News sometimes, okay? Because I think it's important for us. I know the two people on the right of my screen are shaking their head, but I think it's important for us to kind of consume different outlooks and different opinions. Now, I take everything with a grain of salt, because I know that they're going to lie at some point during the day, but I think it's...
There's a difference.
Well, I think there's a difference between... Well, I was just going to say, the one thing about Fox News is that they're not a real news source. It's not real media. It's just lies. And if you look at Tucker Carlson, the only way that man has a base is he knows if he keeps spewing lies, and people will still...
Well, I watch in the morning. I don't watch
not prime time. He's saying not prime time. But I
watch sometimes
more in the morning. Not the opinion.
I put on Fox News for, like, ha-has, like, if I want to get a good laugh. But, like, nothing else
Yeah.
after that. I can understand. I do agree with your point of, though, consuming media from different aspects. I
Sure.
made it a point to read as much media as I can, just because I think reporting, again, they're doing it for viewer count and everything, so I think it's better that way.
Wait,
That-
Oh my god.
I just want to read it so people don't think we're
I'm
just
sorry,
laughing for
Jordan.
no
Yeah,
reason.
people think we're just
Jonah,
like
see if
laughing.
we can let them in the video.
So they said Brett and
Oh,
Ben
sure.
make me watch
Yeah,
Fox
try and
News
see if
from
Brett
time
and
to
Ben can
time.
get in the
Same.
video.
And
Jordan,
okay.
Oh, Jonah, do you mind hopping off and then we hop them on and then we move?
sure.
Because you can only do 3 people at a time.
Sure, I'll hop off. All right. Well,
Because
okay,
well,
sure, I'll hop
we
off.
can bring you back and then we'll just
Yeah.
hear
Let's
them
try
and
and
then
get
we'll
Brett
bring
and
you
Ben
back.
on.
Yeah, sure. No, I'll hop off. All right. See you guys.
Yeah,
We're gonna take a commercial break with him. He'll be right
Commercial
back.
break.
Okay?
he'll be
We're
back.
gonna go to
Oh, man.
commercial.
All right. No,
He'll
it's
be back.
okay. Totally fine. All right.
We're gonna take a commercial break with him,
Try
and
and
then
try and get Brett and Ben on. Have them request.
I'm waiting for them. We're gonna see if we can get somebody from out of such a. But also, can I have one question and then okay. Well, accept the thing, and then you can ask your answer. We can ask your question. But also, I do want to just mention briefly though. Did anybody see the video of the teacher kind of explaining Breonna Taylor's death? Did anybody see that?
I might.
I think also too is the educate. Okay, we're gonna try and get 2 people on. So we're gonna try and get Kent on, and then we're gonna try and get Jordy on.
Try and
It's
get
gonna be
Jordy
hard.
on. Yeah,
We're
did he
gonna try and get
request
Jordy
TJ?
on. Huh?
Check if he requested.
He didn't. I sent him a request. Let me see.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay,
I mean, I agree. The worst part for me is that I am very unsatisfied with the education around these issues that I get in my school. And my school, I go to good school in Massachusetts. And that to me is just saying that, like, the rest of the country, like, it scares me because I'm very, very unsatisfied with the education around civic education and current issues that we talk about, or the way that we talk about it in our schools, that I just feel like, what is other schools getting who may not have the funding that we have?
Yeah.
So
we're gonna try and get Meidas Touch on. We're gonna work on this. Is like doing live television. This is great.
Yeah.
We're gonna try and get
they're
them
probably
on.
just like, who is this like random girl that like joined 2 days ago?
Yeah, I know. We love it here at Meidas Touch. We're gonna try and let me see. We're gonna try and get them on. We're trying. We're actively trying.
Jonah's like watching.
If we can't get them on, like, have Jonah come back in.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna try this again.
If they can't request to join through the comments, they can like click on our actual logo and then request to join.
Yeah, request to join that way.
Or get off Wi-Fi.
Jordy, try that way and see if that works. We're gonna try this. We're gonna see how it works. But no, go ahead. You were making a point about education.
Right. So I was saying that like the education around these issues is just so poor, and I think we can even recognize, if you look at our own curriculums, which class are you actually studying for? Do people really study for history class that much? Kind of, sort of.
Not really. I don't.
I know, unless it's like a push, you're kind of like, and even then, like, the curriculum itself does not do enough for students to, number one, be educated voters, which is another issue in our country, but also like the fact that in a really nice funded school, I'm getting very, very poor education on current events, and my education comes from my research outside of school. That it scares me that what is the majority of this country getting?
Yeah, we learned about the civil rights movement for a day. I just want to point that out. So, thank you, Joe. Jonah's commenting too. We do need civic engagement in our schools. We do need to be talking about current issues. I think if we don't talk about current issues in schools, that's how racism starts to flourish, because then also racism is not something that you're just born out being racist. It's something that is taught. And so although schools are we're actively trying to do the Midas touch. We're working on it, Jordan. But I think if schools are teaching civic engagement, and okay, Jonah's telling me to send him a request again. We're trying.
Yeah, just get him back in if they can't get in.
Okay, Jordy, we just requested you again. See if that works. This I feel like Roach from
If he gets off, tell him maybe get off Wi-Fi.
Jordy, maybe get off your Wi-Fi. Well, you heard.
Oh wait,
what
I
said.
reckon that whoever's trying to join did not update the app because you cannot request unless you update the app.
Yeah.
I would try that. If not, get Jonah back on.
Jordy, try updating your app.
I don't think you can do that.
You got to do all those things. See, we require special things before you can come to this group. Okay, you got to update your app and do the whole thing.
Yeah. So while they do that, I would get Jonah back on. But
we're gonna get Jonah back on. We're gonna invite him back.
Jonah. But like, yeah. And yeah, I completely agree with we need civic engagement.
We're gonna get. Okay, we're inviting Jonah back in now. Yeah. We're trying to do multiple things at once. This is fun.
4 max? You can have.
I think so. Yeah.
Liam, I have to go. So if you want to hop on, Liam, have you request when I get off.
Okay, we're gonna get Jonah back on. Then we're also gonna try and get Midas Touch back on once Nick leaves.
All right.
Thank you, Nick, for coming and
great conversation.
It was a great conversation to listen to. I need to see some hearts. Somebody give me some hearts in the thing so I know I'm saying something
good. We need
good.
some hearts here.
Right,
give me some hearts. I need to see hearts on the screen. Yeah, so thank you for our one correspondent here. And then there were 2. So we just
and I was gonna say, like, even this conversation, right? Me and you, both Democrats, but we have varying levels we're varying levels on the spectrum, but we were able to still sit down and agree on things because we were talking about facts objectively and not from this symbolic view.
Right, because I think the difference between there he is. We got Liam on the show. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you.
We've been trying to do this whole thing for like an hour. So thank you for being here. We were just discussing, and I know, Jonah, we're gonna try and get you back too. We're trying to get everybody back on here. Okay, so we were discussing, you've heard the whole conversation. So we were discussing gun legislation and gun laws, but we just want to introduce you to the audience of 3 people. You are going to the University of Maine, and we love Maine. Minus Susan Collins, but we love Maine.
Yeah, no, we tried.
Yeah.
We really did with Sarah Gideon.
Don't get me started. Don't even get me started on that.
But no, we were discussing civic engagement in education, and I think one of the questions that I hear a lot of young people and high schoolers have is, what's the difference between high school civic engagement and college civic engagement? Is there a gauge in like the curriculum? Are you learning about the QAnon supporters and the lies that Donald Trump
It really depends. I think because in college, depending on your degree, you either do or don't have to do social or civic engagements. That's a big thing. While in like high school, you have to learn it. In college, depending if you even take anything, you do and don't have to do it. There's a really vast difference. So you end up, people really engage when they want to be engaged. They're very engaged. And it's nice because you have a lot of the structure, because a lot of the political party stuff and you can vote, obviously, in college. Right. So that gives you a much better way, a much more voice. While in high school, there's a gray space that no one really knows how to deal with it. It's really hard to try to get involved that way. And that's what I love about what you guys are doing. Because us over at the Meidas University side, I mean, we luckily have a system because most of us either have done it through the Democrats, college Democrats, or some way. And I've kind of always, that's how I got involved with college Democrats. But like there isn't really anything there for Democrats or progressives or any even Republicans who want to be really involved in high school. That's really a big
I
issue.
mean,
So I feel like that's something that I've noticed, and
Mhm.
I'm just glad that you guys are here because this is just wonderful and it's been an
I think
absolutely amazing conversation to hear.
I think involvement in high school is even especially important just because not only does not everyone goes to college, not only is that a factor, but also just um, if we start doing that in high school, even regardless of what I study, if I go to college or not, I will still want to be civically engaged. I think that's something that we should encourage for just people in general to be
Right.
educated and civically engaged in their communities.
Yes, very much definitely, yes.
Yeah. And
So
also, if you're in high school Democrats, I'm just gonna rep that
yeah,
right.
I think also too the interesting thing, you have some fans, Ari, in the comment
Thank
section, but
you. We love you, Sarah.
I think also the other interesting thing is we're trying to get Jonah back. We're trying to get all these different people
If
back.
Jonah, what
But
you do is that if
Where
they
is Jonah?
request to do a live, exit out of the live stream, then go to
Yeah.
your notifications and accept the live request, and that's how you join.
And if you
that's
can't,
a
then
good
just click
point.
on the logo.
Jordy, did you hear that? Did you say that one more time? So
You have to request that it expires after a couple minutes. So if you request either Jordy or Jonah to join, he has to. It'll pop up as a pop down notification. They swipe it away. They don't touch it. Just swipe it away. Then they exit out of the live stream and go to their notifications, and then they tap the most recent request. And they should be able to join.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like,
we need a
Zuckerberg
whole
all this
handbook
money
on how
does
to
this
do
so
that.
hard.
They just started it. So Instagram, it's basically they did it in March, so it's barely a month old.
Yeah, we need like we need a handbook. But I want to get back to the original conversation of gun legislation and gun law.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that we've been talking about gun law and gun legislation for thank you. We've been talking about gun legislation and gun law for a long time, and sort of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is pushing. Okay, thank you, Jordy. You want me to send it again? Just let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, is not only talking about gun legislation, not only talking about the Green New Deal, but they're okay. So I'll send it again. I'm sending it again. I got it. I got you. All right. Okay. So there it goes. But they're kind of doing all of these different. I just did. We're doing all these different policy things all at once. How do you think, Liam, can the Democratic progressive wing of the party, because I know people like Nancy Pelosi, she's just trying to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't run for office again. How did the Democratic Party, the more progressive wing of the party, manage? There he is. There's Jordy. Hi, Jordy. Welcome to the show. It's so good to have you.
Of course he's doing this right now. Mel, it's okay, buddy.
He's excited.
What you guys are doing right now is super impressive. The conversation's been awesome. Melly, calm down, bud. Calm down. We're talking to the students. And my main question for you guys before I leave, and my dog just continues to bark endlessly, would be, hey, y'all are either back to school right now or you're going back to school. Yeah. How does everything in the news, you're watching play out? How is it impacting you? And what are your thoughts as you head back to your junior, senior years? And so with that, I'm going to bow out and I'll let you put Jonah back in the room and anybody else who's in the room. And I'm just really curious and keep doing what y'all are doing. Like Liam said, it's super impressive. And just thank you for being the next generation of just pro-democracy voices. So keep it up.
Thank you so much, Jordy. But we're going to answer the question because I think it's a good question because as we were talking earlier about the whole news, please, 77 of you, please stay because that's the highest ranking show we've had.
People, 47.
We went to now the number's true, but we've been dealing with this sort of thing, and I'm going to invite Jonah back in to come. I'm coming. This is like playing charades with people. It's kind of fun.
I mean, I can take over. I'll take it over for a little bit. I'll just say that, like, you know how we were talking about mental health a little bit earlier and how that should be involved in our holistic approach with all of this.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say, like, generally, especially for Gen Z, like, the climate.
All right.
There we go. We've got everybody here.
After I got kicked out. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Like,
Go finish.
I was gonna say that, like, in the political climate that we grew up in, it's kind of, I just feel like Gen Z, it's so easy to be, like, desensitized to the degree of things that are going on in our society right now. And the fact that we've been so engaged politically, our generation, I think that's really, really cool, because it's like we've kind of had every obstacle not to be, just because of the political climate we've grown up in.
Right.
For me, at least in my school, what this is motivating me to do is bring up these conversations not only in class, but bring it up with our principal when we're talking about redesigning our history curriculums, or right now with my principal, I'm discussing our English literature curriculum. Mm-hmm. And because you know how To Kill a Mockingbird's like our primary, like, race class discussion, I guess.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe we can have a book about that that's not written by someone who's white, that's written by someone who's Black, and engage more African American authors into our curriculums. And I think that's so important. And it's just really cool to see that a lot of our generation's getting so involved. And
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I was gonna go to you next, John. I wanted to ask, based on the question, do you? And I've already kind of answered the question for all of us. I feel like it was a broad stroke, but I think, do you believe that civic engagement in high school and even college is something that we should teach more often? Because as Arty was saying with her, as she was saying, I think that the key is that we all were taught that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and founded America, when in all actuality, he kind of stole this land, which really began the whole white supremacy argument. So I think that do we need to encourage civic engagement in education, and do we need to encourage people to live their own lives with civic engagement? Because often, people are in the party that their parents are in, and they don't really understand, the differences. I was once a Republican. I am now reformed. But I'm just saying,
thank God.
That sort of me and Tim Scott were close friends. But that sort of
I'm sorry.
Movement to understand civic engagement, is that important? I'll ask Jonah, and then I'll ask Liam the same question.
Thank you. Well, I think if you look at the statistics, if you look at college voters, the reason why the statistic is so low of the percentage of college voters, part of the reason is because they go into college not educated and they don't know what's going on.
Right.
And I think one of the ways we can combat that, and one of the ways, like if you look at Georgia, part of the reason why Georgia flipped was because you had all these engaged high schoolers or this young demographic, and they were able to vote and they were able to flip Georgia. So I think starting civic engagement at a young age, which is part of the reason, was really the reason why we have this initiative, is because it's so crucial to get young people engaged and to let them know what's going on at an early level. So when they get to that voting age, then their vote can make the difference and they can be educated. I mean, if you look at the college voters who are educated, majority of them are Democrats because they know the facts, because the Democratic Party is the party of looks at the facts. But I think, just like I said, I think it's super crucial to encourage civic engagement, especially at a young level. And I think we need to implement it into schools.
Yeah. Liam, I want to ask you, have you ever experienced, and I like putting people on the spot with these questions, have you ever experienced have you ever experienced a Democrat or even a Republican that is uneducated on the premise of what the party's stance on certain issues are? Have you ever experienced that?
No idea how common that is. It is so common. Go ahead. You were going to finish your question. Sorry, I didn't.
No, I was just going to say, and how do you educate? Because, you're in Meidas Touch, and so we're all about education here with a little bit of fun. But I think, how do you educate those, people in the country? And then also, how do you make sure that you're not offending people in the process? Because I find myself oftentimes offending a lot of Republicans, and I really don't mean to do that. I just, I just do it.
I think
so how do you balance
Republicans
that?
offending a lot of other people all the time as well, though.
True.
I think the big thing that the big thing that I've noticed is that there are kind of two factions really in all the parties, and even in independents. You have the reasonable, normal people, and then you have the insane wings, whatever wing they are. You have and something that I've really experienced at UMaine, because when I was first involved with all the college Democrats, because I was the former president of my college Democrats, and I'm a senior now at UMaine, but I've been involved since the freshman year, and I used to be in charge of the statewide college Dems as well in Maine. And something that I've experienced, and a lot of the people I've worked with have experienced, is young people are radicalized, especially college Republicans. The ones that we had were literal, like, pre-QAnon. I didn't realize when we had to deal with them that they were going to become QAnon, but they basically were. They were full-blown Marjorie Taylor, like pre-Marjorie Taylor Greens. It was insane. Like, we had a debate with them. They forgot planes existed in their argument about the border wall. Literally, it was so stupid.
Did they bring up?
And like, there are some portions. Let me get back to my point. Sorry, because I sidetracked easily.
That was good. I kind of envisioned that in my head.
One thing that I've always found really interesting is that you can have most people now. You can, especially the reasonable people, if you just go, you have to go to the basics. You have to form a line of consistent, like, where do you all agree? Where do we all agree? You have to gauge the room, figure out what is stuff that we can all basically agree on, and then build from there. Because then you have a level of trust that if there's any issues, anything, you can go back to basics and build back again, or try another way. That's something that I've always found that really works, especially in engineering or anything. Oh my God, in engineering, there's so many people that think their way is the highway or you are gone.
We see that. I was just gonna say, it's so hard. It seems simple, right? That, like, you can just get that middle point, but it's so hard, especially in such a polarized country that we're living in right now. But I think there's also these little things that we think that we should come to a consensus on, like, for example, safety. Like, I know this whole thing was about gun control.
Yeah, we kind of mixed topics in there a little bit.
Yeah, it's true. But I was just going to add that, like, things like gun control, having background checks, that should be something that we should all agree on. And it's kind of scary that right now we're so polarized to the point that there are people that are against it. And
I think
that's something that. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, it's so important to, like, look beyond these party lines. But I will say, when you look beyond these party lines, you might find yourself within the big tent of the Democratic Party. Because honestly, if you just look at, like, the stats, like, Democrats have not really, as much as we put these labels around of, like, radical and extreme and leftist, Democrats have not really changed their position or their agenda of where they were too much. They haven't really moved that far left. The Republican Party has moved a lot farther right than they used to be. If we look at Eisenhower's presidential platform of even what he wanted to accomplish, we can understand that.
If you look at Nixon, for example, he had policies on, he did a whole environmental plan. And if you're going to show someone that now, that, like, someone running for president in 1968 who was a Republican had a environmental plan, they would say you're ridiculous. Like, there's no way. They're like, no,
because we should all agree that we should take care of the planet.
And also, like, we would even consider Nixon a fairly Republican. I was about to say conservative, but Republican Party's not conservative. But we would consider him a very right-leaning president also.
Yeah, and I think also to kind of sort of look at this, right? we all knew that President Trump was a little, what's the right word I'm looking for? There are a lot of, yeah, little, he was an interesting guy. But the thing that I remember most about his presidency,
you're trying to be as like nice as possible.
Yeah, I was trying to be a good boy today. Okay, that's what I was trying to do. But I think one of the things that I remember most about the Trump presidency was the rhetoric of what he was saying.
Sure.
Although it was factually inaccurate, people still bought into it. And so I think when we're trying to combat those talking points, even when Bush was president, remember Bill O'Reilly said that Muslims killed us on 9/11, which is factually inaccurate. But I think
Obama did 9/11. That's what they're saying too.
And so I think I think that sort of rhetoric of what majority of Republicans believe, I think, has been effective, but it has been factually inaccurate. And so when we as Democrats, moderate Democrats, progressive Democrats, whatever you define yourself as, I think when we try to have a civilized conversation, it turns uncivilized because it's just factually inaccurate until their opinion is based in wrong facts.
I don't think Democrats are very willing to bend on something that is factual,
It's literally a party of facts and a party of lies. That's literally the basis right now, and it's so scary. And they're and these lies that they believe, they just keep going back to them because they're like brainwashed. That, they just keep going back to this Fox News.
The reason why, I mean, just if you think about it systematically, any party or any political party that's staying in power by not getting the majority support of the country will go against the democratic system itself. Like that's the point of the democratic system.
100%.
So they have to rely on these lies, which I refuse to believe that they know that. I'm pretty sure they know that what they're saying is not true. What they're saying is crazy. So
well, I disagree a little bit.
They do and they don't. That's the really big issue. It's because they've been brainwashed. As you were saying, they've actually been brainwashed. I was doing research for this, actually, I think for a piece we wrote for Meidas Touch, since Nixon. That Nixon talked to Roger Ailes. That's how Fox News got started, was because of Nixon. So it's been starting ever since then with the Wall Street Journal, and it's just built up. They've built this system to why we are here now. And so facts to them, what made facts to what in the, actually I think of one of the most, alternative facts. They believe in alternative facts, but to them it's facts. To us and to every sensible human person, it is factual. But to them it's alternative facts, but they see us as alternative facts as well. It's just,
I was more pertaining to the politicians themselves in terms of the stuff that they're preaching, because I think for the most part, I think they know, and they're preaching an agenda, obviously for votes, for the media, but and that's just scary to me. I think it really does come back to the way our democratic system is functioning, or lack of functioning, I should say, because the fact the Republican Party have been able to have power when they don't have the support of our country.
I think back to how you're saying a lot of this started from Nixon. I think a lot of the way the Republican Party's campaign has started through Nixon. And what I mean is through name calling, and how Nixon started this whole thing of name calling, and he started a lot of it was about Earl Warren, who was the Supreme Court justice at the time, and they said you either want Earl Warren Supreme Court, which is the progressive or whatever, and it's gonna screw everybody, and their lives are gonna be miserable, and a bunch of crazy laws will get passed. Or you could have me, Nixon, who has these conservative family values. And I think that like you said, that's the way the Republican Party, they're so juvenile to the point that they will run their campaigns and they'll off of just name calling and just making fun of people, and it's scary.
And speaking of the Supreme Court, because I've been reading about the Supreme Court and trying to educate myself, because I think now I knew this original conversation was about guns, but when you get four
Really?
Democrats talking about stuff. We just go all over the place, really. I was reading about the Supreme Court.
It's a holistic approach.
Right, it's a holistic approach.
Yeah.
I was reading about the Supreme Court, and we've been talking about packing, unpacking, going to Europe, maybe backpacking across everywhere. We've been talking about this whole backpacking issue, right? And I think one of the reasons why I believe that Democrats and Republicans, sorry to all Democrats and Republicans, get this whole thing wrong is that it's Congress's choice whether or not how many justices can sit on the court. It's in the Constitution. So as many politicians, Democrat, Republican, Independent, left, right, center, as much as they feel like it's their choice, Congress as a whole, which is now 50-50 in the Senate, and then Democrats lead a tiny majority in the House, it's now the entire Congress's decision. So I think we do need to add more justices on the court because issues like gun laws, see, I'm bringing it back around, issues like gun laws must be addressed. I don't want, people who feel like conservatism is a stance. Being a Republican is not a stance. I think being a Republican is sort of this weird thing. But
being Republican is honestly at this point just being against the Democratic agenda, because I don't see a laid out agenda for Republicans. They don't have legislation or that brings, it's whatever's not Democratic Party, they'll be like, that's us.
Super off basis, but I was just gonna add, because I'm from Massachusetts, but Ed Markey did introduce a bill trying to add seats to the Supreme Court.
We stand our senator.
Yes.
Well,
Sorry.
But I think we've got to unpack the court. There have been 3 justices under this previous administration, which is unprecedented in modern day history. I don't know about, when George Washington was alive, but it's unprecedented in modern day history. And so I think, and when Obama tried to do it, we all know how that went.
Well, I think a big part of that, though, so I already cut you off, but I think a big part of that, though, is that, Republicans will go, to see how quickly they wanted to add another member of the court after RBG's death. And you see certain other things that they'll take their time on that, aren't important to them. For example, healthcare. Trump's like, oh, I'm going to have my whole healthcare plan.
Where is Trump care now? I don't even know where that is.
Operation Warp Speed, I don't understand what that was. And then, but it's scary that they'll take their time on things that, stolen justices. But they'll take their time on things.
They will. And it goes back to your original point of there has to be dutiful civics in every single school. It should be required not only in elementary. You should learn very thoroughly I think throughout entire schooling. Our entire schooling system has they've completely omitted this one very important fact of how the hell does our government and society work? Because obviously it's kind of failed. So we need it both in elementary school, in middle school, in high school, and it should be required in college. Because then you can never stop learning civics. You can never stop learning how our government works because it's continuously changing. It never stops. And it would help so much with understanding how everyone works, how the different interactions are with different parts of our society. It would help with gun control. It would make people smart about how to approach a solution, or even maybe create new ideas or new solutions to all these existing problems. And just before my brain forgets, to go on the Supreme Court thing, I really like Pete Buttigieg's idea of doing the 15-member Supreme Court, 5 liberal, 5 conservative, and they serve, I think it's 10 or 18-year terms. And then you have 5 independents that serve 1-year terms, but they're elected by the 10 permanent, semi-permanent members. And it would balance it out in that, I think it would balance it out, because if you do, you make sure that they're moderates, and you make sure that the spread's very even, and it very evenly matches the mood of the America. they have to be a very good job at making sure it's that. But I think if you keep it very spread and representative of how our country is, it would make laws much more fair in the United States, and it would make everyone feel like they have a say and the system is not rigged. And I think then we could try to do other reforms that have it not be fucked up later down the
We
road.
desperately need a branch of government that is representative of the political spectrum that we have in our country, because frankly, that's not our Congress. It just isn't. And I think people need to realize that, like, our Congress is not representative of, like, what our country's at. We're actually far more liberal than we'd like to think, like, overall, I would say. And just to your point about education, starting at a young age, about civic education, the moment I knew that civic education was a big problem in America was because I'm an immigrant. But even in India, I learned more about America's history and America's civic duty than I did when I came over here and studied.
Yeah,
I think the big thing, though, too, is that part of the reason why we need to learn civic engagement is there's this misconception that what goes on in, like, the political realm only affects voters, which is simply not true. It affects every single American, whether you can vote or not. And so it's just another reason why you should know what's going on and things that are happening to you that will affect you.
And I just wanted to address Liam's point quickly about the Supreme Court thing, okay? Because I think 15 justices is a lot, okay? But I do believe that we need more justices. I like an odd number of justices myself.
Odd number, okay.
You know, I like odd number of justices myself. Maybe 13. You know, but I think that the court needs to have. I know this probably will never happen in my lifetime, but I think the Chief Justice should be an independent. I do not
totally.
That's just my view. And then you've got your 6 justices that are more conservative, and then you've got your other 6 justices that are liberals. And I think that Chief Justice. Now, I know some people may like John Roberts, but I mean, if you didn't want to preside over this impeachment hearing, I'm done with you. But I think, you know, I do believe that the Chief Justice should be an independent. I think that you kind of set the tone for the entire court to deal with the issues of gun legislation, trying to bring it back to the original conversation, but to deal with the issues of gun legislation, to deal with the issues of voter suppression. I saw a comment earlier and I forgot it, but it dealt with voter suppression and the food and the water sort of thing. So I think that those conversations must be dealt with by the Supreme Court and not by the Congress. And also, just one thing, I have to do this because he is my governor, and, you know, I disagreed with Gavin Newsom on this. Remember when Kamala Harris was going to be sworn in as vice president, and he appointed the Secretary of State, which wasn't a person of color. He was a person of color because he is Hispanic, but he wasn't a woman. And I think that sort of kind of dismissing that sort of woman voice, especially a Black woman's voice in Congress as a senator, I think he did a very poor job of trying to equate Kamala Harris's impact to the new senator. And so when what Arty was mentioning about representation in Congress, there are only 3 Black senators in the entire Congress. Well, yeah. So I think that that's a problem that we have to slowly address. There is not enough women in the Senate. There's not enough minority women in the Senate. And I think to deal with the issue of gun legislation, we've got to get people that are diverse. I understand that we as Democrats are a big tent party, but I mean, us as a big tent party, we're not seeing those wins or those runs be successful in the Senate. And so I think that we need to focus more so in the Senate. Now I know, well, actually I do want to make a correction. There are 3 Black senators now because of Reverend Warnock, but I think that's still not enough. And I think that we've got to make that adjustment, because there's a large amount of this country that I just don't feel is represented in Congress, and we can't deal with the issues until they are.
And I mean, I completely agree with you. And I mean, like, I think even if we have, you know, progressive people who recognize the need for these situations, I still think that representation of women, representation of people of color is so important, because I think at some point we look at issues of race and issues of racial disparity and equality through the lens of still, how does a white person view these issues, and how does a white
Right.
person solve
Absolutely.
the issue, versus
Yeah.
having the direct representation there gives like communities honestly like a direct voice of like having them being heard in Congress. And I think it's so important.
Yeah.
Their voices need to be heard. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
definitely.
I want to
that
ask Liam a question. Do
uh-huh.
you plan on running for Congress at any point in time? Do you think, you know, you
I
I
think
can
would
it's
do
love
funny.
to. I don't, obviously I am not old enough to run.
right, but I'm just,
I
you know,
mean, I'm just surviving getting out of college, getting an engineering job.
yeah,
But definitely, I think maybe down the line, but I feel like it would be so much more important to have someone not a white man.
yeah,
I mean, obviously, I'm gay, so like that's at least I'm some type of diversity. But for Maine, we had such a vast history of women in power. I mean, we were, I think, the first state to have 2 women senators.
yeah.
And we were the first state to send, I think, a female senator, or at least I think both a female senator and a female member of Congress. I'm not positive on that. I know we were the first one to send a first senator, I think. But that's something in Maine, like that's why when you saw Susan Collins and Sarah Gideon, there were no men. And the Democratic Party, we have, at least in Maine, we have a very strong ethos of making sure it's always equal. I mean, I'm not sure if this is nationwide, but I know in our party, if you get a man in charge, it has to be a female as vice chair. And it's always like that in every single level. So I feel we've tried our best, but I feel like and I think we're starting to do it. And no, Susan is not a real person. She's a robot from Mars, and we're not really sure how she's still functioning on Earth.
Yeah.
But it's something that we're really trying to make sure, and I think it could be nationwide, is that you have to make sure that if the party is diverse, the people in the party recruit diverse people.
Absolutely.
And that is something that has been missing. It's been a white man's party, and we're slowly breaking through. But I feel like one really big thing that we could pass, and I know Biden could do it, and I know we have the chance to do it, and it's probably our only chance in our lifetimes, is passing the Equal Rights Amendment. If we pass the Equal Rights Amendment, it sets the standard, it sets the ethos for the next 50 years of starting that change. And I feel like we're at a point in time that Biden is our FDR. We haven't had this chance of having the vast movement within the next 2 to 4 years of actually making good change in our country.
Yes.
America tends to do this weird thing of like, we are stagnant for like 50 years. It's like, it feels like 50 years, and then we finally do a nice big jump. It's really annoying.
I think we're the most, I hate to use this word, but I think we're more misogynist than we actually realize. Because I was listening to Democrats and Republicans about Vice President Harris, and they were, saying that she wouldn't win if she ran for president. They were saying that we would never see 2 women at the helm of the United States government, and these were Democrats we were talking to. And so I think that this sort of misogyny towards women and LGBT.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have heard it. There's just something about her.
Exactly.
That doesn't presidential. And I think that because that's so that's subtle and that's so deep rooted into our society, that's where we've gone here. I feel like the number of people who wouldn't vote for women because they think that they're wasting their vote electorally, I think if that number of people combined and actually just freaking voted for that woman, we would not have been in the place that we are today.
Same thing with the stock market. It's the same, it's the exact same mindset. People do not realize that like if you like put your money somewhere, it changes. It finally clicked with the GameStop thing, but you can do the same thing to voting. Like you do realize it's like there's this weird disconnect that like, oh, my vote doesn't count. It's like, yeah, it does. Look at Brexit. There were people that voted for Brexit because, oh, I thought my vote wouldn't count. They literally said that. And the same thing happened with Trump. People voted for Trump because like, why not? Let's try it. And it's just they don't realize that that their vote doesn't count. Like in Maine here in the 2nd congressional district, which is one of the most Republicans are now trying to target this district because we stole it. We took it back in 2018, and it's been in Republican hands for a decade. We won it only by ranked choice voting, which should be across the entire nation. Ranked choice voting. If anyone doesn't know what ranked choice voting is, it's automatic recount, and it just happens all at once.
It failed in my state.
It's one.
Yeah,
oh,
it was supposed
it's
to
wonderful.
pass, Jonah, and then
I know.
We had a 75%
polling
approval rating, and it failed miserably.
I was doing a lot of canvassing for ranked choice voting. And no, it's unfortunate. No, I definitely agree, and also like it gives third-party candidates an opportunity, or like an.
And that's another thing, is that the parties get stuck in their ways, and if you have no one challenging it other than like if you have like a Republican challenging a Democrat, we have the exact same issue that we're in now. Independents or other people that can push the narrative help it, because in Maine we only have like 35% of our state's Democrats. And then there's like only 29 that are Republicans. The rest are all not registered independent voters. And so that's why I get back to the whole Supreme Court thing of you have to have a shit ton of independents, because that's how you can gain a lot of the middle people. That's what we're trying to get. You can guarantee Democrats will vote most Democrats will vote Democrats, and most Republicans will vote Republicans. But the vast majority of voters in the United States are these independently minded voters that don't really associate with either one. They kind of do, because independents aren't really independents. But to get the independents, to get them, you have to make sure that they're represented. And I think that would then in turn help try to get some more representation. Because if you give those independents a voice, it forces everyone to have to change the playing field. I mean, that's the whole thing about politics is you always have to move the goalposts, always change the playing field to get shit done. It's annoying, but that's how it works.
And with ranked choice voting, you're not going to end up with someone so incredibly polarizing. I don't even know if that makes sense.
No.
Since you're not going to end up with a figure like Trump, and we have figures like Trump in our Senate as well. But like, you're not going to end up with someone like
Ted Cruz. We're talking about you. Go ahead.
I know. I know the mayoral race in New York right now is supposed to be.
I'm watching. That is a race that I'm watching very, very closely. Because I really want Andrew Yang to win that.
Well, we won't say. All right.
I do. This is just
I'm
my
not
view.
saying.
We're not.
I think that he has a plan for a lot of different things. I think he's my candidate. But anywho, I was just gonna say I think the only independent president.
Second comment.
the only.
I know. No, he gets it though. This is super sidetrack. But I've worked with the campaign. It's not fun.
Yeah, no,
we don't have to go in depth about that.
Yeah, let's not.
No,
Let's go back to gun control because that's my favorite. Let's go back to that.
Let's do that.
But I think the only independent president that I'm going to see is Tia Leone and Madam Secretary. Okay, but I think that is. Huh?
Right.
Yeah.
No, go.
We want to wrap up this gun control, every other topic in American conversation. So I'm going to give everybody the floor for like 2 minutes, just to kind of talk about, what they're expecting from gun control and legislation. I'm trying not to laugh at the comment, but what do you expect from gun control and gun? I'll start with Liam. What do you expect Democrats and Republicans maybe to do in the future when it comes to gun control?
Well, I definitely think one of the first things that's going to happen, I think the NRA is going to go bust. People know that they are backed by the Russians. There has been proof that they have gotten Russian money. And I think what's going to happen is that a lot more information is going to come out about the NRA's and Russia's involvement in our both 2016 and 2020. And I feel like that's going to just sink them along with all the other lawsuits, especially with March for Our Lives. So I feel like that's going to be a large thing that's going to happen. Exactly. They are a criminal enterprise. Another thing that I think is going to end up happening is that I feel like it's already kind of started to. Sadly, if you see with FedEx, they are actually a very conservative organization, but here they are. They were a victim of a mass shooting event. I feel like it's annoying, but with conservatives, they have to, and most people, but mainly conservatives, I've noticed, they have to experience it to understand it. So I feel like it's going to happen a lot more to them, that they are going to realize that, oh, we need to do crap. Because a friend of mine, their dad, they were getting the mail the other day, and he's white. He's the most white straight guy I've met. He got stopped by the policeman in rural Maine getting mail in his mailbox. And like, for Mainers, that doesn't happen. But like, for people of color in majority cities, that happens all the time. And it clicked in his brain, like, oh, that's how they must feel, to be accused of stuff that you're not doing. And I think, I really, really hope that it just starts to click in people's brains that we need to do common sense stuff. I also think another thing, and I think Democrats are finally getting it, we have the mandate right now. We won. Yes, it was by the slimmest of margins, but look what Republicans did. They had the slimmest of margins, and they passed the worst tax cuts in the U.S. history that has led to the greatest inequality in our country's history. They passed health care, which has tried to undermine basically the entire healthcare system of the United States of America.
Right.
And we need to take the time, and we just need to do the initiative. And I think they're starting to finally figure that out, that we just need to go, excuse my language, we need to go Obama in his Obama's last year, fuck it mode, and do it. And I feel like you got to do it. You got to be in that mindset. And the second you show results, people vote for results. And I feel like if we just take the initiative, people will go on board, because we have to set the mainstream way of going, this is how we do it. And I think Joe Manchin will get on board. If you tell him, you're either going to be remembered in history as a complete asshole or someone who helped change America. And I think you just need to tell him, young people are going to just vote you out. And they need to realize that we are the most powerful voting bloc. Like, in Maine, Jared Golden wouldn't have won if UMaine and all the other, the 3 colleges in our state didn't vote for him. If we didn't vote for him, he wouldn't be in office. So you just need to tell all these politicians, just look at some other examples.
Markey's the same example.
We started the campaign 12 points down, and it was quite literally most people who weren't voting age yet, that phone bank, that relational organized, that stood out at field events, that got in this win.
Same thing with AOC. AOC was down 36 points at one point, which is like ridiculous. Everyone's like, yo, she's no chance. But it's that like grassroots campaigning that caused her to win.
And that's what gives us hope for our country, that grassroots organizing and this voice of the people, it can like prevail. And I think if we have this opportunity.
I think we do now. I think we really do have the opportunity, because I think it's what I think 2020 awoke in the Democratic Party is that we thought when we kick our asses into gear, we can get shit done. I think we changed the history of the world by voting Donald Trump out of office. Like, if any of you are watching, are any of you watching like For All Mankind on Apple TV Plus, like the TV show? It's about
listen, I have too many subscriptions. I do not need another.
It's really good. You get a free subscription for a year when you get a new iPhone. It's really good because it describes what happens if the Soviet Union beat us to the moon. And it shows a very good example of what can go wrong will go wrong. Cold War. And I think that's something that people need to realize now is that we just changed history. Look, you can tell your grandkids, you can tell your family members. People will look back in history and look at how you voted, look at how you engaged in this time, and you're like, we stopped a tyrant. And
look at this show.
People will realize they don't think that we stopped a madman from being in charge. We can pretty much do fucking anything. I mean, screw the NRA, screw Joe Manchin. if he wants to be known as a fucking idiot, you can get some Republicans on board with gun control. I mean, Susan might be an insane robot, but there are certain people in the Republican Party, and I'm friends with some of them, that they know that we need to get shit done. Are they scared of their base? Yeah, but they're slowly getting it that they kind of just need to grow the balls and do it. Because if they don't, they're no longer going to be in office.
Joe, I know you want to say something, but I really want to get Arty to kind of do the whole wrap-up thing. Do you think...
Okay.
Go ahead. No,
go ahead.
Okay. This is what we do. No, so what are you expecting from gun control and gun legislation from Democrats and Republicans? I'm going to ask the same question. Go ahead.
Me?
Arty, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that was just said, but like even on top of that, I think, I think there's issues fundamentally that we can pass, especially with the Senate and the Congress that we have now, that we can pass. And like you said, we need to just do it. And I don't want to like obviously atone to a single political figure, but like Elizabeth Warren, I'm just gonna call it out. Like that kind of drive of passing policy on top of policy on top of policy is what we need. Because quite honestly, as much as important it is to speak about and raise awareness, we can't stop there. And I think even in schools, like learning about, I know we had talked about education earlier, but learning about like how policy is actually written, how policy is actually passed is just, it's so important, because then we can realize that most of our senators are not part of that process.
Well, that's the importance of school.
Passing policy, I guess. I don't know.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add, that's like the importance of Schoolhouse Rock. Without them, how would we know how?
Exactly. You know that song, I Am a Bill? I'm just... Well,
of course. That's what I'm referring to.
I'm just speaking a little bit... just speaking a little bit about March for Our Lives. I'm communications director for March for Our Lives Boston here in Massachusetts. And quite honestly, I think the amount of power that this movement has, we need to use it. When we're talking about legislative policy, about gun laws, March for Our Lives needs to be right there, and I'm sure that they will, because news stations right now are willing to cover us. They're willing to work with us, and reporters are willing to cover these stories. And I think that we're not going to get many chances like this. I just don't think we are.
Absolutely.
And if we want them, we need to create them, and like now.
Now, Joe, I want to ask you the same question. Do you think that, what are you looking for as far as gun legislation and gun laws from both sides of the...
I think everything I wanted to say was said, but like both Liam and Arty emphasized, we need people to be educated on what's going on, and we need starting at the young level. And I want people to recognize things like the NRA, that it is a criminal enterprise, and we need people to actually know the truth. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Listen, we want you to come back, Liam, because you're fun and we love you on this show.
Thank you. It's been so much fun. Thank you for trying. I really wish Instagram did more than 4 people allowed in a room, because it would be so much more fun. It would be great to be able to have all the Meidas brothers on as well, because if we could have them on and then all of us, that would be, I think, one thing that I really want to do. And Jordy, if you haven't, checked your text messages, because I know he's watching this. Jordy, but I really want to have a live stream of all of us with the Meidas brothers on either Instagram or Facebook, or have it on all 3 platforms, and really allow everyone to be able to ask any question they want. But I feel like we need to give people the ability to show that young people, hi, we're here. Because people really forget that. And there's a lot of inaccess that I've found in youth politics, in politics in general, but really in youth politics. And like this type of format is great, because as you've seen, people can comment, they can ask questions. I just wish we had more people, because the more people we can reach, the more, and like, I think that's something that people really don't know. And I feel like what you guys are doing right now is an absolute great way, and I really look forward, and I hope I have the ability to come back and talk, because y'all.
Yes, we're gonna have you come back. But when Jordy was on, the numbers did go up. I just want to make
sure. It's just the dog woofing, but we still got 60 people.
Go ahead, Joe. Let's make your thing.
Well, I just want to plug Meidas Varsity Blue
Yes.
quickly. I think, like you were saying, Liam, the whole purpose of all of this is to allow high schoolers and college students to have a voice. That's the whole point of this initiative. It's
Absolutely.
also allow high schoolers to be educated. So if you're a high schooler that is interested and has whether you don't even have to say something, whether you want us to talk about something, like please reach out, join Meidas Varsity Blue. You can click the link in our bio. But I just want to say that the whole point is really to we want your voice heard.
Yeah, yeah.
Really
Yeah, we want your voice heard. Listen, we need you to follow, because I'm trying to get us to 200 followers this month.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're close. We're close.
We're very close to that number, so we need everybody to follow. We want to thank Arty for coming, because she's new. Also, she joined us as a co-host. We're super excited. We thank Liam for being here. I texted him last night. I said, "Hey, can you do this?" He said, "Yeah." Okay, great. So that was the whole thing. We thank Jonah. He leads this whole thing. This is his thing. This is what he does. We just get on and talk about stuff. So we want you to do that. Listen, join us on Friday, next Friday, I think. We'll probably do something like this again.
We'll have a rundown, yeah.
We'll have another rundown on Friday, 4:30 Eastern, so come and join. And also make sure that you listen to somebody else's voice. Get your shot, your vaccine, get tested, do something, go outside, visit a friend. I don't know, whatever you people like to do, go out and do it. Because, we are living in isolation. So that's why we're doing this way. So we'll see you all next time. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you guys.
It's great having you. Thank you so much. Bye.